Hey everybody, it's Dave here from Blueberries Games with another edition of Magic the Gathering Commander Before and After. This is part 2 of the Talrand Sky Summoner deck. This is me doing the after effects after I went ahead and spent about 2 weeks going through all my stuff and updating this deck and upgrading it with some nice cool foils to be a little bit more flashy. So I'm going to go ahead and start off like I did with the last video with what I took out. So let's go ahead and take a look and we'll see what we got. So I started off with the card draw. I took out the Opt, the Peer Through Depths, the Inspiration Foil, the Jace's Ingenuity, and the Opportunity. I took those out, and don't worry, some of them have made a return, but I had to take them out because I either were an outdated version, there was a cooler picture or what have you, or I had a foil. So those are the first things I took out. On the defensive side, it was mostly counter magic and, other things that would get rid of everything on the board. So I took out a counter spell, a cancel, a stoic rebuttal, a dismiss, and an Evanril's disc. And again, don't worry, there will be updates and upgrades that show why I took those out. As far as the ramp goes, I only took the one card out, which was the Sky Diamond, and believe you me when I tell you it was upgraded to something cool. I did not own these, but I actually did go to a convention this last weekend, and I did some trading with some of the other vendors and a couple of customers. I did not buy anything for the deck like I told you, this is my rule. I had to own it, but I did not own some of these cards, but I did trade some of the cards I did own for them. I did not buy anything, but the upgrade to this is actually a really good one. On the utility side, I took out the Relic of Progenitus, and the reason I did that is because as far as utility goes, a lot of other things were better for the deck, and this actually didn't really do a whole lot for me as far as, fitting the theme of the deck. It was great for Graveyard Hate, but it didn't do anything else. Copy Artifact was a hard decision. Taking this out was more because the card that I put in for it was better than it as far as that. Plus, one of the things I realized when I was making the upgrades to this deck was that there are so many choices that I wanted to play that I went ahead and I made the decision to actually make a second mono blue commander deck because I can use this in that. I went ahead and took it out. So it was a hard decision too. I was like, I couldn't figure out all the stuff I wanted to add and take out just because there were so many good options. But I went ahead and took this out because I have a better deck for it. Same thing with the Trinket Mage. The next mono blue deck I create is going to be based on artifacts. The Trinket Mage would be better off in that deck than this one. Turnabout was just an odd choice from the beginning. I know why it was in there, but it, a one-turn tap or untap one target player's things that are specific, it was too narrow, so I took that out. Treasure Trove, another hard decision just because I wanted card draw in the deck. I realized that I had enough card draw, and I put more in I replaced it with other things, so Treasure Trove just was too underpowered for what the other stuff does. Spell Twine I took out. Stolen Identity I took out. And Mind's Desire I took out. All those were just because their casting costs were too high for what they did. There are other options that could do that. I did not add them to this. I made the deck more streamlined towards getting the theme of Talrand to just create the tokens. Yes, I know that Mind's Desire would do it just because, it's another sorcery to add to it, but the stuff I added into it was cheaper and more efficient. Sphinx of Uthum I took out. I wasn't really happy with the card, and the card I replaced with him is, an identical in a couple ways, but just not anywhere near as expensive. And the Diluvian Primordial I took out. Yeah, it was shiny, and yeah, it was cool, but man, when I played it, it underperformed. The most controversial decision I had to make when I was doing this deck was taking Palinchron out. He creates so many opportunities as far as going infinite in many ways. But again, didn't fit the theme of the deck all that well. It was just in there to be in there, and I have a better deck that could utilize his ability better, so I went ahead and took him out. And then when we come to the lands were a no-brainer. I went ahead and took out all the regular lands in here. And yeah, as you can see, they're mostly snow-covered lands. And when I say mostly, it's because not all of them were. I had just some regular lands and regular islands in there that were foil or regular just islands. But I found better lands to go in there. And I'll show you them as we're finishing up the last part of the deck. Terminal Marine was kind of like a semi-fetch or a faux fetch, if you will. It's not really a faux fetch because it actually, taps for mana. It just, I found way better options than that. Same thing with the Bant Panorama. I'm sure that if I have a Bant deck, it'll go in that deck rather than this one because this is a monocolored deck. It just didn't really fit. Floodplain, again, faux fetchy kind of card, but it was too slow. And the Bad River, same thing. And then I don't know what I was thinking when I put the Seed of the Synod in. There's no real artifact theme to this deck, so it didn't really fit too well. So I found some really good options to replace a lot of these cards. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what they were. All right. And you'll have to excuse me. I'm a little sick today. All right. So the card draw version, portion of the deck. I took out the opts just so that I could throw in a foil opt. Whenever you build a commander deck, a lot of people just love to show off their bling. I had one, so I went ahead and I just swapped out the old and busted opt for the new foily one. Not as new as some of the other ones, but at least it's, a newer version. Reach Through Mists, I added in there just as a, I like the cantrip versions of drawing cards. I had in there some that were like draw 2 cards for 4 or draw 3 cards for 5 or 6. I wanted more cheaper options, and I had these. I just didn't put them in there when I made the deck, and I don't know why. So that's also a foil. Found in my stuff a foil Ponder, so I threw that in there just because it was foil and because it's one of the better card draws that blue has as far as cantrips go. And Peer Through Depths, look at the top 5 cards of your library, remove it if you're on instant or sorcery, put it in your hand and put the rest on the bottom of your library, and it's foil. And it helps you dig for more instants, and there's a lot of instants in here, so you had to put it in. And Telling Time. It took me a while to find this card. It's 2 to cast to look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 into your hand, 1 on top of your library, and 1 on the bottom. So, essentially you look at 3 cards, and you get to choose the best one. Put the second best one on top of your library. And then put the last one that's usually in the way on the bottom of your library. So that was the additions of the card draw and instance that I added. The next portion is the defense portion. I took out some things, but I added some better things. The first edition was Curse of the Swine, and the reason for that is because it exiles X creatures. It exiles X target creatures for 2 blue and X, and for each of those creatures exiled, its controller puts a 2/2 green boar creature on the battlefield. So, for a while I looked at this card as a pretty bad card, and then I realized in Commander, it's actually pretty good. You could exile, say, some of the biggest baddies, and that includes Eldrazi. So you exile your opponent's Eldrazi, and then give them a 2/2 boar. It's a good swap. So I went ahead and put that in there after thinking about it. It ended up being probably one of the better choices that I added. Essence Scatter is defensively. I chose Counter Magic and then a couple of artifacts that destroy things. Essence Scatter replaced one of the Counter Magic spells that I removed. It's also foil. It's only because it was cheaper and because in a multiplayer game you're going to face a lot of creatures. So it's not as limited as you might think when you can counter just a creature spell. I replaced the counter spell with a counter spell, only because this is one of my favorite cards in the game and especially that I own. I am a foil counter magic junkie. I try to collect as much of it as I can. I have had this for many, many years. When it was first released, I went ahead and got my place out of them. So I went ahead and just replaced the counterspell with a full counterspell. One of the other counter spells that I added was Archmage's Charm. It's 3 to cast, and it has choose one. You can either counter a spell, have target player draw 2 cards, or gain control of a non-land permanent with converted mana cost 1 or less. There's a lot of 0 to cast stuff out there. There's a lot of different things out there that, you could steal. This was such a utility and defensive card just because it can either counter a spell or make you, because you're not going to have somebody else do it, make you draw 2 cards for 3. Or you can gain control of, a very pesky 1 or less cast permanent. That could be creature, artifact, enchantment. I mean, the list goes on. So this was a natural addition. And yes, that is a full Archmage's Charm. Force of Nature replacing Force of Nature, that's very old and not the right card. Force of Negation was a replacement for another counter. It is 3 to cast, and if it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell, and if it was countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. I was originally going to go with negate, and then I realized I had these, and I was like, well, it would make more sense to put this in there because you can actually cast it for free. So I put that in there, and I took out a lot of a couple of 3 to casts counter spells. So I replaced them with better 3 to cast counter spells. For instance, disallow 3 to cast counter target spell or activated ability or triggered ability. So it does more than just counter spells. So I had cancel in here. This kind of replaces cancel with no problem. I wish I had a foil one of these. I don't, but at least I had that. And the Nevinyrral's Disc I replaced with my From the Vault's Relics foil version just because I wanted to update it. But I also wanted to upgrade it and make it a little bit more shiny. So that was the defensive portion of the deck. The ramp portion of the deck. Again, I told you I didn't make a lot of changes. I added 1 card in the ramp portion. It was Arcane Signet. Sky Diamond is 2 to cast, enters the battlefield tapped and adds a blue. Arcane Signet is 2 to cast, does not enter the battlefield tapped and adds a mana of any color, your commander's color identity. So my commander's blue, it adds a blue. It was a way better option than a Sky Diamond. Alright, utility part. I told you I had some better options for utility that were a lot cheaper. First one up was Search for Azcanta. 2 to cast, legendary enchantment. We're in commander, so it doesn't really matter if it's legendary. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put it into your graveyard. Then if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform Search for Azcanta into this bad boy here. Turns into a land. Taps to add a blue. Taking an enchantment and turning it into a land is not always the greatest, especially when it only taps for blue, but it's the other ability. So for 3, so 1 blue and 2 of any, you can tap it and look at the top 4 cards of your library. Reveal a non-creature, non-land, so that's artifact, instant, enchantment, list goes on. So instants and sorceries is what you're looking for on this one. Instants and sorceries is why we have it, but we have other things that you can get with it. So you look for a non-creature, non-land from among them and put it into your hand and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it's essentially card draw without being card draw. So you don't draw the card, but you definitely get to put it in your hand. So definitely a nice utility card there. Now, Dramatic Reversal went into the deck. I told you I took out the thing that just untaps or taps one person's either artifacts, creatures, or lands. After doing some searching, I told you guys before I like to put an infinite combo in every one of my decks. This is my infinite combo card. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you real quick why it's an infinite combo. For those of you who don't know, here's the combo that apparently when I was going through all my stuff, I talked to a friend and said this is actually a common combo. So Isochron Scepter, I showed you that in the first video. 2 to cast artifact imprint. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile an instant card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand. And for 2 colorless, you can tap it and copy the card, then you may cast that card. Okay? Keep that in mind. So, Dramatic Reversal is a 2 to cast instant. You attach it to the Scepter. Okay? You have in play I have Gilded Lotuses in here. I have the new Commander Sphere. If you have artifact mana production, you can go ahead and create 2 infinites going on here. Okay, you need a Soul Ring in play or a Gilded Lotus to get this to work, or any kind of mana rock that produces 2 mana, at least 2 mana, or a combination of a couple that produce at least 2 mana. So you go ahead and you use the Isochron Scepter to cast Dramatic Reversal, untapping all your artifacts. So you tap, say, a Soul Ring, add 2, use the Isochron Scepter, cast Dramatic Reversal, untap everything that's not a land. That includes the Scepter itself and the Soul Ring. You keep going. With your commander in play, we went ahead and looked at the rules, my friends and I, because I had to find out. And it is true that when you use Isochron Scepter, it's considered casting the spell, not copying it. You copy it and then cast it. So, you can either get infinite 2/2s, or with Gilded Lotus in play, you can get infinite mana. So there are 2 different versions of an infinite combo in this deck as your finisher if you need it. So keep that in mind. I thought it was nice. I wanted an infinite combo and I wasn't sure if I could find it, and then I found this with the Scepter. So, and it's foil, so why wouldn't I put it in there? Up next is Archmage Ascension. It is a 3 to cast enchantment. At the beginning of your each end step. Now keep that in mind. It's each end step. If you drew 2 or more cards this turn, you may put a counter on Archmage Ascension. As long as the Ascension itself has 6 or more counters on it. If you would draw a card, you may instead search your library for a card. Put that card in your hand and then shuffle your library. A lot of card draw in this deck, a lot of instants because it's Talrand. So you can actually, if you're playing in a very big multiplayer game, essentially it can actually happen by the time it comes back around to your turn after you've played it. And what it does basically is it turns every draw you have into a demonic tutor, where you get to search your library for anything you want. Very utility based, and I've used this in other decks. It works really well because when you're not drawing cards but you're searching for what pieces you need, you can search for your kill combo, your infinite combo. You can just search for whatever you need. So it's really good. Jace's Sanctum is a 4 to cast enchantment that instants and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Again, a lot of instants in this deck. They're not all that expensive, but at least every little bit helps. And then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you scry 1. So it helps you get some chafe out of the way, some lands if you want. I replaced the Palinchron and I replaced a couple of other creatures. The only creature I added was God Eternal Kefnet. He's 4 to cast for a 4/5. He's a flyer. He's got a step ahead of a lot of the creatures I already added just on that alone. But when you may reveal the first card you draw each turn. Again, another each turn, not just yours. Whenever you reveal an instant or sorcery this way, copy the card, and you may cast the copy, and that copy costs 2 colorless less to cast. This is another version of that. It's actually not copying, so it counts for Talrand. You can go ahead and cast the copy, and it gives you the token. The bonus is that whenever God Eternal Kefnet dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you may put him into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. So he's really hard to remove. So he can't be exiled, he can't die, he just keeps coming back. He's a major upgrade to some of the stuff I had in here before. Narset is like the king of the new planeswalkers. He's 3 to cast and you get 5 loyalty counters. Each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. That's to stop other people from being able to do what I'm doing with this deck. And then his down tick, and he only has a down tick, is to look at the top 4 cards of your library, reveal a non-creature, non-land card from your among them, and put it in your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library. He is a planeswalker version of Search for Azcanta when you transform it or flip him. So he is a digger. He helps you dig for the things you need. It's not drawing cards, by the way. It doesn't count for all the other stuff. It is putting it into your hand. Another addition was Jace the Mind Sculptor. I know a lot of people don't have this card. I just happen to have it. It is a 4-cast Planeswalker that has 4 abilities. He's one of the more expensive Planeswalkers in the game. He has a loyalty of 3 to start. His first uptick is a +2. Look at the top card of your library. You may put that card on the bottom of your library if you wish. His 0 is basically the Brainstorm, which is draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on the bottom of, or on top of your library. His first down tick is a return target creature to its owner's hand for -1, and then -12 is basically a game winner. Exile all cards from target player's library, then that player shuffles his or her hand into his or her library. If you're facing, somehow he lives to have 12 counters on him, and your opponent has, say, 3 cards in their hand, basically that becomes their library. So he's pretty good. There's a reason why he costs so much. Up next was Primal Amulet, 4-cast artifact that also makes your instants and sorceries cost 1 less to cast. As far as ramp goes, I didn't put a lot in here. I put a couple of things that made your spells cost less. So I went with that instead. And then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, put a charge counter on Primal Amulet. Then if there are 4 or more counters on it, you can transform him, so when you flip him, he becomes a land as well. And it says tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So in this case, we'll do blue. When that mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery, copy that instant or sorcery. So, you know, you're casting spells. Say it's a cantrip, you get to tap this for 1 blue, and you get 2 copies of that spell. So, good utility. It kind of helps with the mana as well. And last, as far as utility cards go. So I told you guys earlier that I went to a convention this weekend. I traded for some cards. I traded out one of my more expensive cards for a lot of lesser expensive cards, but when I tell you lesser, not all that much lesser in expense. So for years and years and years, I've been trying to get my hands on a Tamiyo because I think that she's one of the more, unique and better Planeswalkers in blue. So I'm going to read her to you, but this is something that I've wanted for many, many, many years. Couldn't get a hold of or find anybody who had one for trade. If I did find somebody that was in really bad condition, this is in perfect condition. I love this card. It's one of my favorites in Magic. So now that I have it, I'll read it to you. It is a 5-cast Planeswalker with 4 loyalty counters to start. Uptick of +1 is tap target permanent. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap phase. Or untap step. That's the +1. The first negative is -2. Draw a card for each tapped creature target player controls. That's pretty good in Commander because you have somebody who's a purely just aggro deck and they're not attacking you. It's good for you because then you can draw X amount of cards for each tapped creature. Now, the ultimate. -8. You get an emblem with. You have no maximum hand size. For the rest of the game, you can always have as many cards as you want. The next part is the reason why I wanted the card. And you also get an emblem that says, whenever a card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you may return it to your hand. So if somebody's a mill deck, and they mill 4 cards, all 4 of those cards, if you have the emblem, go to your hand instead. It's really good. I've loved this card forever. After many, many years, it's finally mine. I wish I could find a full version, but unfortunately, I'll just be happy with what I can get my hands on. And I'm so happy that I finally got it. Alright, for the lands. I took out the regular, boring-looking, snow-covered lands for these. So I put in the full art snow-covered lands from the Modern Horizons set. I had a bunch of them. So I replaced them, and I also was able to take the regular lands that I had, the non-snow-covered lands, and I was able to replace them with enough snow-covered lands to make every basic a snow-covered land. So that's important. Remember, I'm using a card that says, look at the top card of your library, and if it's a snow permanent, put it in your hand. So that's why they had to be snow-covered in this case. In the other deck in Purpose, they didn't have to be. If I had more versions of the card that helps this deck with snow-covered, or snow anything, it would have been better, but that card's really hard to find. Alright, so the next land I I put in to replace the other ones was Reliquary Tower. It also says you have no maximum hand size and you just have to add the colorless. It's in here just because it's a free, you have no maximum hand size, and it's also shiny. Mystic Sanctuary. It's an island itself, so it counts for like finding islands or, you know, stuff like that. It does not count as a basic land though, unfortunately. When it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped unless you control 3 or more other islands. So it can come into play tapped if it's early, and if it's late, you're going to get it to come into play untapped. And when it enters the battlefield untapped, you may put target instant or sorcery from your graveyard on top of your library. So good utility as well as far as, you know, being on a land, and it counts as an island. This card all around is just good as far as going into a lot of blue, like a blue deck. The cycle that they put in for Throne of Eldraine, where they were non-basic lands, but they had the basic land type, and they all come into play tapped unless you control 3 other of the same type of lands. So in this case, islands. All of them had, you know, a good utility to them, and they were all pretty good. This is the best one of the 5, in my opinion, but the other ones have good use too. And oh look, more Throne of Eldraine, because apparently they liked making good lands in that set. Alright, Castle Vantress is a land that says enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island. Again, you're playing enough islands. It adds blue, and then it also, for 2 blue and 2 of any, you can tap in Scry 2, so you look at the top 2 cards, you can put them either on top or on the bottom of your library, or you can put one on top and one on bottom, or just leave them both there. So, good utility, good for, you know, keeping your draws better. And speaking of keeping your draws better, I tout that I'm a big fan of fetch lands because it helps eliminate land draws, because you get your land onto the battlefield rather than drawing them. So I went with Fabled Passage. You tap it, sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library, and if you control 4 or more lands, you untap that land. So it basically looks for any basic, puts it into play, and if it counts if you have 4 lands already, and it untaps it. If it doesn't, if you don't, then it comes into play tapped. One of the cards that you guys didn't see on the cards that I removed is for a reason. It's an expensive card. I wanted to keep it protected, so I put it into a binder. But you'll see. I'll tell you what it was as soon as I show you the card that replaced it. Up next is Prismatic Vista. Again, more for fetching to thin out the land draws and get them into play. Tap it, pay a life, sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land card, put it in the battlefield, then shuffle your library. It is the basic land version of a fetch land. So these cards are getting more expensive by the day. I didn't realize that. I thought it was when I first saw it. I was like, oh, okay, it's like a half fetch, but no, it's actually really good. Don't sleep on Prismatic Vistas at all. They actually are good in the right deck, specifically monocolored decks. And I've got the fetches in here, the actual fetches. Now, I took out the original fetch that was in here. I believe I had the green-blue one. I replaced the green-blue one with the Prismatic Vista, the Fabled Passage, Flooded Strand, and actually with Polluted Delta. I took out the opposing color fetches because I have a deck that's probably going to use the opposing color fetches, and I put the ally color fetches in. So I put Flooded Strand and Polluted Delta in. They both are pay life, sacrifice it, and go search for an island. And one's for plains and one's for swamp. That part does not matter in this deck. It's only to go search for islands and put them into play. So those are the final upgrades that I made, and it was tough. I sat here for quite a while going over all my cards, trying to figure out what am I going to put in here because there are so many good choices. I loved every single one. I didn't want to take anything out. It was really tough. So those are what I chose, and I'm sure I'll update this deck again sometime soon. Every set adds some new stuff, and some of it's really good. So again, that is my Magic the Gathering Commander before and after. This is the after. This is part 2. I hope you enjoyed. So go ahead, and if you need to, any comments, put them below. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, share it out to your friends who you think might be interested in it as well. And that's all I have for you today, guys. Thanks for watching.